of Life, a show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. Hannah's Way won the Sidney Taylor Book Award in the Younger Readers category in 2013. I met the author Linda Glaser and illustrator Adam Gustavson at the Association of Jewish Libraries conference in Houston, Texas, where they shared the story of the picture book's origins. I'm here at the 2013 AJL conference in Houston, Texas, with Linda Glaser and Adam Gustavson, the author and illustrator of Hannah's Way, which is a gold medal winner of the Sidney Taylor Book Award in the Younger Readers category this year. So I'm very happy to have the chance to sit down with both of you at the same time. It's very exciting. First, I'll start with you, Linda, to tell a little bit about the book Hannah's Way and what inspired you to write it.
Okay. Well, the book itself is about a girl. It takes place in the Depression era on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota. She's the only Jewish girl in her class, and there's a class picnic that she would like very much to go to, but it's on Saturday. They're arranging rides, and she's unable to go because in her Orthodox tradition, she's not allowed to ride in a car on Saturday. On top of this, her family has moved from Minneapolis, where she did have friends, to the Iron Range, where she doesn't have friends, and she longs to be part of the group. So she's trying to figure out a way to get to the picnic and possibly make some friends and feel more like she belongs. What inspired me to write the book was that there was an exhibit in Minneapolis quite a few years ago called Unpacking on the Prairie, Jewish Women of the Upper Midwest. In one small display, there was accounts, little anecdotes of different people's memories. They had a whole bunch of different index cards with different little anecdotes on them, and one of them was basically the skeleton of the story that I just told you. In the end, her class all agrees to walk to the picnic. I was very touched by their kindness, and in the book I threw a lot of obstacles in her path and made her be the one who ultimately had to find her own way. But the children do come forth as the heroes in the book, all deciding that they want to include her, and they all walk to the picnic.
Somebody mentioned this morning at the session that it has a strong anti-bullying message because all the kids are reaching out to help the one child in their class who needs them. So can you comment on that?
Yes, definitely I feel it's a book about tolerance and about kindness, also about anti-bullying. It is being recognized as a book that's about tolerance. Tolerance Minnesota is featuring it actually for all Minnesota educators this year. And on the Learner Carbon publishing website, there is a link to a teacher guide that includes a number of activities that are specifically anti-bullying and tolerance.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing I was just thinking about is the Minnesota connection, and Carbon is in Minnesota as well. And I know other books of yours have been about Minnesota. I interviewed you years ago for the Book of Life when you wrote Bridge to America, based on the life of a man you knew who I also interviewed who came from the old country to the new country, and his part of the new country was Minnesota. Are you originally from Minnesota? How did you develop this very strong love of place?
Well, actually, I am not originally from Minnesota. I am originally from New York. And so I actually consider myself a New Yorker at heart. And then I moved to Berkeley, California, and lived there for many years. That's where I met my husband, but he comes from Minneapolis. And so when we decided to look for a place to raise our children that felt like a kind of a wholesome place, we chose, and that was closer to nature, because Duluth is right on beautiful Lake Superior and has many, many beautiful parks and wilderness nearby. So that's why we chose Duluth. But it also has a small but strong, warm, and vibrant temple community that feels like an extended family. And I think that really, when you say, do I have a sense of place, it's more my real strong feeling of connection with the temple community, feeling as though they're my extended family, that has drawn me to writing these books, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, beautiful. Thinking about what little I know of Minnesotan culture, mostly from listening to Prairie Home Companion, Gustavson strikes me as a name that sounds like it's from that part of the world. Is that true? Or?
No, we should have been. We're Finnish stock with a strain of Swedish-speaking Finns in there. But then I'm also part Ukrainian. But we got to the East Coast and we never got any further inland than that.
Okay.
I'm a descendant of the Bronx Finns.
Bronx Finns, okay. So, Adam, tell us about how you got involved in this project. Some listeners may not realize that authors and illustrators don't pick each other under most circumstances. It's sort of a shidduch that's made by the publisher. So talk about how that happened for you, and also why do you think that you were or were not a good match for this manuscript?
The way I get work as an illustrator, some of it is through reputation, which, I've done 20 books out of, say, the 10 million picture books there are to choose from. So reputation doesn't actually go all that far. What it winds up is just the serendipity of people who hire illustrators being aware of you. And then in between, I promote my business. I send out holiday cards I call unholy holidays. They're basically these registered, legitimate holidays that nobody really celebrates, that just individuals have declared and had registered. So things like
Pi Day,
Penguin Awareness Day. At some point I had done a one for Cowboy Poetry Week.
I like that.
Yeah, and it had led to a book called Rough Tough Charlie that was about a stagecoach driver, incidentally a cross-dressing stagecoach driver.
What a great topic.
It's a better book than I'm making it sound. It's really wonderful. But that was my foothold into historical fiction. And from that, I wound up doing The Yankee at the Seder.
I was going to mention that, which won, I believe, a silver medal from the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee. Yeah,
it was a wonderful honor, and particularly because it was such a neat book to work on, such an incredibly specific book. The game of being an illustrator in some way is to take a story that you were unaware of and then to sort of find yourself in it and to sort of become the other half of it and make something that to a reader is inextricably linked to it, that you can't have one without the other, and they're seen as this whole cohesive unit, which calls for kind of having a skill of developing emotional in routes into a story and finding little bits of emotional resonance within the text that stand up as visuals to sort of flesh out the whole thing. So when Carbon called me, they sent me the manuscript. And what was nice about it is I'd been doing a lot of kind of heavy historical fiction, like Yankee at the Seder takes place at the end of the Civil War, and the amount of things that are thematically at stake are of national consequence. At the same time, I was doing a book about Alice Roosevelt, the daughter of Teddy Roosevelt. When this project came in, what was nice about it was it took place in the past. It took place in a very specific place that wasn't where I was from. But it had this quietness to it. That's another type of work I'm interested in that I hadn't been doing. And it gave me this room to sort of breathe and find a landscape and find a home for people to live in and dress them and do all these things that had such importance in the life of a little girl. But it was as introverted a story as some of those others were extroverted stories. Actually, it was a really good fit for what I wanted to do at the time and for a type of work I like. Some of my favorite painters are the Edward Hoppers and Fairfield Porters of the world, who deal with quietness and space and, to a certain extent, even loneliness. Taking something that's historical and making it resonate simply by making sunshine so convincingly that you don't care if it was 1950 or 1920. But that living rooms and hotel rooms and open fields still feel like living rooms, hotel rooms, and open fields.
Cool. This morning you were showing us some slides of photos from the era that you looked at to do your research. So talk a little bit about that process of researching for historical fiction illustration.
If you'd asked me something about my own personal life, there's so many little compositions that surround me throughout the day. The way my china cabinet lines up with my living room when I sit down at a table. And I've got the way the world fits together as a puzzle in my own life pretty well memorized. But to find that in other eras takes an awful lot of input. So the first 2 months of a project like this involve digging up class photos from the era, researching architecture from the era, looking at the landscape of the space, and really just taking in far more than the book is ever going to show, to the point where I'm just thinking in 1932 Minnesota. And I close my eyes and everything just looks like 1932 Minnesota, and I get the sense of what clothing looks like from a three-quarter view and a profile and a back view and a worm's eye view and a bird's eye view. Whether or not they'll ever be visible, it's needing to be able to see around things in this place I've never been and can't visit. So I immerse myself as much as I can through as many sources as I can. There's an extent of thinking about the time period as a cutoff point, where if the book takes place in 1932, as Hannah's Way did, I then had to start thinking backwards as to when the last time this family bought furniture was, and when they bought clothes, and when their house was built, and then went and researched all of those eras. And then when I figured them out enough, then I finally started drawing. And sometimes in starting to draw, I figured out all the things I didn't know yet. From the standpoint of them being an Orthodox family in Minnesota in the 1930s, trying to delve in and find out what exactly that would have meant for things like their home decor and dress and pastimes. People need to do things with their hands when they're talking. People need to read papers. People need to knit. They need to sit on couches. And so all of those things needed to be researched to the point where they could fall into the background of the pictures and let the pictures just be pictures. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very interesting. Wow. So both of you have been recognized by the committee in the past, and I guess now you've sort of worked your way up to the gold, which is very exciting. So can you talk about the impact or the feeling of getting the Sidney Taylor Gold Medal?
Well, it's really wonderful for a book to be recognized. I guess I feel humbled more than anything else, because so many of the other award winners, or even ones that have been presented that did not get an award, are such wonderful books. So it just feels humbling that this one was chosen. And also being here today, I'm just so indebted to all the librarians who put so much heart and soul and devotion into recognizing and keeping quality Jewish children's books alive.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate a lot of that. I went to a talk this morning where we got to explore the criteria for the award and look at books that were in the running, look at the list of other books that placed as honor books, and having had a book on the list in the past, it almost feels a little, I want to say, almost a little embarrassing in a way, for just happening to be doing the right thing at the right time. And it all just work out the way it did. The book very well could have come out a year earlier than it did, or a year later than it did, and be surrounded by completely different titles and its own path to publication, its own path to having pictures, and all the people that had input along the way, the ways it changed just in the process of being made. Just happened to put it in the company it did, in the hands of people that it did. And so I find the whole thing really humbling to be part of, and it almost made me realize how much smaller a part I might play in all of bookdom. But at the same time, here, one thing I kept saying this morning when I was giving my little talk was that I work in a cave. The months that were spent on Hannah's Way, I was living in the universe of Hannah's Way, and eventually I emerged from it and I wallowed in some other universe for a while. And sometimes I juggle these universes, and then I come out of my cave every now and then, and I get to see what these mean to people. And that my relationship with Hannah's Way, to a certain extent, stopped when the paintings were done, or when I looked at the final press proof and saw how it was going to print up, which is the point at which other people's relationship with it starts. And for me, every picture has a story of what went into making it, and then hearing people talk about their stories of reading it or reading it to somebody is a completely different experience than I had. And it's a really important reminder when working on pictures and working on stories that there are these two completely different relationships that the book has, and that my relationship of just being completely surrounded by it is so different from the relationship that starts when we're all done. it was a very nice reminder of why to do this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. It takes a village not only to create the book, but to then give the book life beyond its original creation. And thank you guys for doing that.
And thank you, because you're a part of it.
That's right. I'm promoting it. The committee awarded it, so everybody's reading it. So it's all part of that. It's nice to be part of that together, isn't it?
Yeah. Really is.
So we're talking about the challenges of historical fiction, and I guess I'm wondering if there were any particular challenges that make a good story that either of you want to talk about.
The challenge was to be able to make it have universal appeal, that a child who knew very little about being an Orthodox Jew would still be able to feel for Hannah and root for Hannah and want the best for her and feel what she was feeling. And I do feel that the illustrations, Adam just added enormously to the emotional depth of the story. Just hearing people today, people just kept on saying how the ending, which I think of as a very uplifting ending, always makes them cry no matter how many times they read it. And I just feel that wanting to promote more kindness in our world, maybe this book is doing a little something, and that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
I guess the reason that this book is historical fiction is because you found the spark of it back in that era, but the story doesn't have to be tied to that era specifically. It's really, as you said, universal. It's about emotions, so it could have been set now, right?
And that is true. It could have, and it just never occurred to me to do that.
So you just took it as you found it and didn't think about changing it?
No, I did need some help deciding exactly where to place it, specifically what time to put it in, because it was more vague when I encountered the story. And it had to fit in with the story that I had created of her being the new girl in school and moving from Minneapolis. But I guess I liked the idea of it being historical fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Adam, challenges of historical fiction.
That's right. One challenge of anything always is if you've got an uplifting theme. It's really easy to make an uplifting theme sentimental, and if you overdo something uplifting and it becomes hard to believe, suddenly you've lost everything that was uplifting about it if people can't believe kids rooting for each other. And some of that winds up in the lap of what it looks like. How many times have you gone to see a movie and the orchestra swells a little too much at that moment, and suddenly you can deflate a little bit? So sometimes making the right person visually that things happen to in the book has something to do with it. One challenge is always simply finding someone that you can draw 16 times, emoting differently, wearing different clothes under different lighting circumstances, that these things happen to. Because if there's a glitch in it, the smile isn't convincing on one page, we could suck all the air out of a beautiful story.
It's a big responsibility.
It kind of is. Arranging all the right props to lead you through the story and having them looked at from the right angle from what the mood of the story is, to me that's where the fun of it is. What I might be good at doing is using those specifics to make what universal theme is there in a story kind of believable. And they're more believable if you're sitting in the room with them. Mm-hmm. At the very least, I'm glad it works because it's what I can do. If it didn't work, I would just wouldn't be able to sleep at night with my skill set. So luckily, there are times where my particular skill set and what room a story leaves for it come together well and are received at the right time for what they're doing.
This was one of those times.
Yeah. One of the things I like about doing a book like this in the 30s, there is a sort of straightforward what you see is what you get about things like fashion. It can be hard, I think, in contemporary stories to get a theme like this through, because when we look at children wear a lot of logos.
Yeah.
They wear a lot of trademarks that you're kind of not allowed to use. And the moment you start to pull those specifics away, suddenly you're trying to just make stripes and polka dots look cool while getting a story to be believable. And it's hard. People wearing brown knee shorts and white shirts and blue dresses, they let you in so much faster.
That's what they really wore.
Right.
Yes.
They really wore it, and there's something direct about that fashion that lets you into who people are faster rather than seeing them as billboards.
That's interesting because I work in a preschool and I keep thinking I should do a photo essay on T-shirts. I could do a Star Wars Lego T-shirt a day. I had a day where there were 3 little boys all in Superman shirts, so I had to take a picture. So you're right. A classroom full of kids with no logos would look unnatural and unrealistic.
Yeah, and if it's a funny story, you just get to make up your own civilization. I recently did a book like that, and I had fun making up fake football teams and dumb banners and sitcoms to go on lunch boxes. But, if I had to do that with Hannah's Way, that's not really what it's about. For this story and what it needed to get across, it's something that needs technology and popular culture pulled away to let you be more direct and to give it space, give it breathing room.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about other projects, so that's what I want to ask you both about now, is what other projects you're working on, especially if there's anything that's going to be of Jewish interest that, Sydney Taylor might be looking at in the future. Linda?
Well, at this point, I have 2 projects going with Albert Whitman. One is a Shabbat board book called Bim Sings the Baby. And that one's been interesting because even though there are very few words, I had to put in the image of what was going on in the illustrations before there was ever an illustrator in order to make this little thing make any sense. And so that was really fun. I must admit that the entire time that I was writing the text, I was imagining that the little baby was my grandbaby, which I don't have any grandchildren at this point. And so I think that a lot of emotion can go into the fantasy of what it would be like if I were a grandparent. So that's
you created your own grandchild.
Yes, exactly. But also, I too teach religious preschool, and those little kids have been the inspiration for a number of my books, so that's been really fun. And then the other one that I'm working on is a Passover picture book. It's a fun one, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's in the works, and we'll watch for it in the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
My immediate future is sadly devoid of Judaica. I did finish a book this past year. It came out in the fall by Bill Harley, who's a children's musician and multiple Grammy winner, called Lost and Found. I didn't get to make up my future grandchildren, but I did get to give my friend a 1980s sitcom with a matching lunchbox, as I mentioned before. And I even got to find a stuffed animal that got thrown out when I was in kindergarten. Stemming off of that, we've started working together as an author-illustrator team, again for the same publisher, Peachtree, on a series of books. The first one is called Charlie Bumper's Verses to the Teacher of the Year, which is just the travails of a slightly less than average 4th grade boy who happens to get for 4th grade the teacher that he hit in the head with a shoe while he was in 3rd grade, and all that year entails. And I guess in a month or so I'll be starting on finals for the next book in the series, so that'll be fun.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for all that you do to promote children's books. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Thanks. It was nice talking with you.
Thank you very much. There are so many ways to connect with the Book of Life. Fan us at facebook.com/Book of Life Podcast. Follow us at twitter.com/Book of Life Pod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. You can also listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. And of course, find links to everything at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Thanks for listening and happy reading.